Hey, gang, this is Carl White. I'm your co pilot here for the next few minutes as you listen to the Scotsman Guide Author Showcase. And this is where we get the authors of the Scotsman Guide magazine, both the commercial and the residential. And we take a deep dive into the authors of some of the articles. And this one was an article written by Chris Moschner. And this was in the July edition. Make sure you go check that out online. You can just go to scotsmanguide.com, and that's spelled with one T, scotsmanguide.com. And you can go look at you can bring up the articles, the periodicals from past months, as this was July, and check that out. This is one of my favorite ones. I like this topic a lot. So Chris, located in Cincinnati, great to see you, brother. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Carl. It's great to be with you.
So now you, just for a little bit of background, you're the Chief Marketing Officer at AAG, is that correct?
Yeah, in fact, AAG was recently acquired by Finance of America, and so I am the Chief Marketing Officer of the combined entity. So technically the Chief Marketing Officer of Finance of America, but right now we've got both brands that we're marketing under, both Finance of America Reverse and American Advisors Group.
All right, real good. And the article you've written, which was in the July edition, what are we going to talk about today? What was the article about?
Yeah, it's really about just kind of an interesting conundrum that we're facing in the reverse mortgage industry, right? There's an incredible demographic shift that's happening, and frankly, a problem that we can solve, right? This idea that a majority of retirees in this country don't have enough savings for retirement, really to maintain their quality of life. And yet there's a potentially obvious solution hiding in plain sight, right? Called a reverse mortgage. And only between 1% to 2% of potential homeowners have used this as a solution. And that just seems like a disconnect to us. So we talked a little bit about some of the drivers of this savings crisis that's facing older Americans, why that's happening. And then we talk about just mostly that the idea of using home equity as a retirement tool is something that we don't believe has gotten enough airtime. And for not all, but for some and for many, can be a really, really great solution for them.
Yeah, and by the way, I should have mentioned at the beginning, the title of the article is Brighten Their Future. Very well written, by the way. So, in reading the article, you went into depth of the current state of the retirement savings, and I'd put it as a crisis in the United States. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to. And I think that to talk about this the right way and with the right context, you've really got to take a broader view, right? So what I would say, go back to 10,000 feet and say, what's really happening in the United States? Well, what's happening is over the last 100 years, life expectancies have more than doubled, right? They haven't increased by a few years. They've more than doubled, right? So we're talking about people who were living into their 30s, maybe 40s on average. And now people are living into their 70s and 80s. And you might say, well, gosh, 100 years is a long time. But if you think about the quantum of human history going back thousands of years, right, this has been yet a small blip. So people aren't yet mentally prepared, I would say, emotionally, mentally, and even now financially for what that really means. So people are living longer, and that's the underpinning. But across that same period, right, we've seen the collapse of the defined pension plan, right? This idea that you work for the same company, as long as you're there for 25, 30 years, they'll give you the golden key. You got a pension, you're all good, right? That no longer exists. That 50 to 60% of Americans had that in the 70s and 80s. Now it's down to 4 to 5%, right? So that risk has been transferred to the individual via the 401k. And then on top of that, you add things that have happened in the last 5 to 10 years that have only exacerbated the issue, which is obviously we've seen rampant inflation, we've seen market volatility, and even the bedrock things that are supposed to be in place for older Americans, Social Security, Medicare, we're now hearing that unless there are changes to those within the next 10 years, those could potentially be facing benefit cuts or insolvency. So no matter how you look at it, there is a problem that seniors need X amount of money, right? And you can, and this number's been quoted a variety of different ways, but let's say the average senior needs about $750,000 to maintain their quality of life if they're going to live to age 85. Most Americans have saved between $100,000 to $200,000, right? So there is a gap of multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars per individual, which then if you aggregate it across everybody, that number is staggering. It's actually close to 4 trillion with a T dollars. So this is a monumental issue. But again, coming back to where we started, there is a solution because the amount of home equity that people have is actually 3 times that, right? So people have close to $12 trillion of home equity, and these are people 60 plus. And the nice thing about home equity is people own homes, right? One of the interesting things about the financial planning industry in general is it's hard for people to participate in traditional financial planning because you need liquid assets to manage, right? What if you don't have those? So it tends to be that most people who actually have a financial advisor or have access to those tools tends to be then fewer than 10% of Americans, but 80% of older Americans own a home, right? So not only do you have the supply of home equity, but you have the access, right? And so it comes back to there is a obvious solution that potentially could help and significantly help to solve some of these macro and demographic issues that are facing older Americans.
Yes, and you talk about there being this gap between how much assets they own to what they're likely going to need to keep their current level of lifestyle going. Boy, it looks like and again, you mentioned this in the article, that it's no secret that the last couple of years has not been, real kind to the bond market and stock market where people had their savings. So even if it was up for a little while, I think you said it was like a 20 some percent decrease in the stock market and severely affecting their 401ks.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And again, I mean, for those who have saved, regardless of how much they have, they are subjected to market volatility like the rest of us, right? And we all know the old adage, well, as you get older, put more of your money in bonds versus equity. There's rules for this that says subtract your age, from 100%, and that will tell you how much of your portfolio you should be holding in bonds. And I think the idea here is that even the bond market in 2022 had its worst year in the last 40, right? Because as inflation went up, people didn't want to be holding long duration bonds for obvious reasons. And so even the bond market, so there really wasn't a safe asset as you look at the typical securities industry. Now, obviously, we recovered a bit in 2023, but there remains uncertainty. Nobody knows where this is going to go, right? The Fed has said, we think we might be close to being done, but nobody's sure. We don't know that inflation has been vanquished completely yet. It has certainly come down. So this uncertainty persists, but ironically, home values have held up, right? I mean, people were wondering, would we see another 2008, right, where home values fell off a cliff? Actually, no, we have not seen that. Home values have been generally stable and in many markets have actually continued to increase. So again, that supply of home equity that the borrower or the homeowner has access to has remained quite stable and in some cases has actually increased.
Yeah, so I think, and you know way more about this than I do, but it just seems like from the outside looking in, sometimes a lot of people think, well, but the government's going to take care of me, right? I don't need to be saving up money because the government's going to take care of me. And in the article, you mentioned the implications, for seniors that if Medicare and Social Security become insolvent, and you had some, some pretty staggering numbers there about we all know that we might not be in the best shape there, and it's actually far worse than what a lot of us, or certainly than I would have thought, that if Medicare and Social Security go away, man, that's serious problems.
Yeah, and again, I think I would just say nobody knows how this is going to go, and we hope policymakers in Washington get ahead of this. I think the message from us is not to fearmonger or not to make people just say, hey, there's nothing going to be there, because we don't know. What our message is really, use all the tools in your toolkit, right? So in other words, for many Americans, and I would actually say our research would say the majority of Americans over 60 the majority of their net worth is tied up in their home's equity, right? And again, that's worth repeating. The majority of their net worth, so greater than 50%, and for some, it's much greater than 50%, is tied up in their home equity, and they're not using it, right? So I think our message is simple. Regardless of what's going to happen in the markets, regardless what's going to happen with Social Security, use all the tools at your disposal and maximize the tools that you have. And home equity is one of them, right? And it is an asset that and there are tools like reverse mortgages. And what we can talk about even later is there's even more tools than just reverse mortgages to unlock this. But the bottom line is there are ways to turn that from an illiquid asset to a liquid asset, so you can use all of the assets at your disposal: stocks, bonds, savings, CDs, annuities, whatever else you has, and home equity. Gosh, that just makes sense to us. And obviously we want to impart that on more borrowers as well, so that no matter what happens in the future, they have a better foundation and they're more well prepared than they are today, frankly.
All right, so we've definitely been twisting the knife here a little bit on the pain. Man, this is a real problem, and certainly the reverse mortgages looks like it's one of the great solutions. Why do you think the use of reverse mortgages? You mentioned, like, what was it, like 2%?
Yeah,
why do you think the use? I'm sorry, say it again.
Less than 2%. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, less than 2%. Which is remarkable. Why do you think the use of reverse mortgages remains low despite its potential benefits?
Yeah, and that is the $1 million question, right? But and as I've come into this industry, I do have some theories and things that I've learned and things that we're going after to help change that narrative. First, I think you got to go back to the beginning, right? And these products are now over 60 years old. They really gained some momentum in the 80s, thanks to legislation signed by President Reagan. But the bottom line is the industry did stub its toe in the early years, right? And we won't shy away from that. There were provisions, or I guess I would say there weren't protections built into these products that we now have today. So just to give you a few examples, like a non-borrowing spouse. So if, let's say, husband decides he wants a reverse mortgage and doesn't put his wife on the actual loan, if the husband dies, that immediately forced a sale for what's called the non-borrowing spouse. The industry obviously saw that was a clear issue and rectified it, I think, over 10 years ago now. So that's kind of point one. There was another instance where, again, people could unlock all this equity from their home. We would give it to them and they burn through it in a relatively quick period of time, like under a year. That obviously isn't good, because we then gave them this cash that they then spent and then potentially ran into an issue where they couldn't pay their ongoing property insurance or upkeep and things of that nature. So there have been protections in place now where we only give so much of the proceeds in the first year. And there are elements called ELISA, life expectancy set aside. Think of that like an escrow account. Those have also been set up to make sure that people are being responsible, so they don't inadvertently foreclose on themselves because they're not paying property taxes or insurance, right? So that's taken care of. And we're making sure that we're helping them make responsible use of the proceeds that they get. On top of that, there's now counseling that's required. So every person who buys a HECM in this country, a home equity conversion mortgage, they have to go to counseling by a third party. So they're educated on the features. So I think just structurally, there are things where the industry has come a long way and realized that they've had to put protections in place. And the good news, and I think this is a really important point, those are now in place. So the reverse mortgage of today does not look like it did just 10 years ago or even 20 years ago. So these have significantly more protections they have. That's point one. But point two is just simply good old education and lack of understanding. And this, to me, is really what gets me out of the bed in the morning, because I'm a marketer, right? What do marketers do? We drive communications, we educate, right? The whole point of having a marketing team is to drive awareness of a product and a solution. And there are just flat out misperceptions out there that I would say largely aren't true. And I'll rattle through them, and you've probably heard them all. The bank takes your house. Not true, right? A reverse mortgage is a loan like any other. It just has payment flexibility, so you don't have to pay it out until the borrower either dies or leaves the home, right? But you always maintain title to the home. Number two, you don't participate in the upside if the home appreciates. false, right? Like any other loan, if the home appreciates, when the home is sold, you keep the difference between the proceeds of the home and what's owed on the loan, right? And there are provisions, and I would say even more than that, people actually don't understand the protections that have been built in place. Remember, these are products that were offered and insured by the Federal Housing Association. You'd have to ask yourself, why would the federal government offer products to 62 people 62 and older? Because they have unique benefits for that population. So what many people don't know is reverse mortgages are called a non-recourse loan. And that means that if the home value ever dips below the value of the loan, the borrower or their children are not on the hook for a difference, right? That's not true of a conventional mortgage. Additionally, as I mentioned earlier, you've got payback flexibility, which means if you never want to make payments on that mortgage and you want to leave it till you ultimately sell the home, you can do that. And that obviously gives the borrower an immediately a cash flow advantage. So really, again, there were structural things early on that have been solved. And really, I would say the majority of our work now is good old-fashioned blocking and tackling. How do these things work? What benefits do they have? And then dispelling the myths that are out there. And frankly, Carl, like we see a direct correlation between education and interest to buy. So in other words, if you don't know a lot about these products, you think they're scary and you don't want one. If you know a little bit about these products, you're kind of interested and you're somewhat interested. If you know how these things work, you're all in and you're excited about them. And that just plays out in the customers, right? I mean, we use, and the last point I'll make on this is, there's a reason that we use our customers in our advertising. And in fact, we're just about to launch a new ad campaign with Tom Selleck. But we are specific to always find borrowers and testimonials, because overwhelmingly the people who get these products, they don't just like them, they love them. And they love them because they have fundamentally improved and significantly improved their financial standing and financial security. So it truly is just a matter of us doing the good work of continuing to educate people on the truth and dispelling the myths that are out there.
Man, good stuff here, Chris. How do you see the reverse mortgage industry evolving here in the next decade? Anything on the horizon or anything that you would do that you think needs to be done?
Yeah, I'm really excited, and I'll take, and this will be a bit of a shameless plug, but like I'm going to take back some of the opportunity I think we have in front of us now at Finance of America, now that the AAG and Finance of America brands have come together, because I think we've now got some of the secret sauce that has been missing, and I'll talk a little bit about what I mean by that. But the first thing we got to do is we've got to change our language, right? So we've got to not only educate, but we've got to change our language because we've been stuck using the same term. I mean, first of all, when we address older Americans, we call them seniors. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to be called a senior when I was 85 years old. Like, let's get that right. And then two is stops using the term just reverse mortgage. Let's talk about more broadly home equity and home equity solutions, right? And you could just ask 10 people, do you want to buy a reverse mortgage? 1 out of 10 will say yes. You ask people the same question. Do you want to unlock your home's equity so you can use it to better your retirement? 5 out of 10 people will say yes. You're offering them the same solution. So and by no means are we tricking people. We're just telling them what we are offering in a more direct way. And then the other thing is we got to give people choice, right? And that's the magic of what Finance of America. Finance of America actually has a suite of tools, right? And this is the thing that I am so excited. We're just 3 months into this acquisition, right? So we're just getting started, but being able to go to people and say, look, we have a suite of solutions that will enable you to responsibly unlock the equity in your home, and you can be in control and you can pick the one that's right for you, is substantially different than, again, I've got a reverse mortgage, do you want it, right? So I think as we do 2 things, elevate the conversation to home equity and demonstrate that we've got a suite of tools. Some are full solutions, some are partial solutions, some operate like HELOCs, home equity lines of credit, but all have the benefits of what reverse mortgages have. That to me is magic. And then the third component, which I think is a bit longer tail, we've got to then innovate and continue to expand our offerings, because I would submit the reverse mortgage itself is not the outcome. It's a means to an end, right? So in other words, people aren't showing up to just buy a reverse mortgage because they want a reverse mortgage. They're doing it because they need something else. So I think we would be smart, and I think this is, really this is how we're thinking about it at Finance of America. What can we offer them as a suite of solutions once we unlock this equity for them, right? So this idea that once they say, let's say they unlock $75,000 from their home, mortgage goes away. Can we offer them like help by paying bills? Can we help them with services like fraud protection, finding a handyman for home repairs, home improvements, right? Because let's be honest, people do not want to go into managed care facilities. They want to stay in their home. But a lot of times that means making expensive upgrades to the home. What if Finance of America had turnkey solutions? And we do partially today with our home improvement business to allow them to make those directly. So in other words, they don't even have to write a check. It's just managed via their home equity, so their home can get upgraded. It can get optimized. We can give them services that they need. And as they approach end of life, we can then enable them to help kids and grandkids pay down debt, end of life services. It kind of opens the mind. So I guess the big pivot then is we think about home being at the center of a modern retirement. And we like to say at Finance of America, home is a superpower. It really then unlocks, kind of almost like AARP offers a really holistic set of tools and solutions. We can then offer those same set of tools and solutions for older Americans, enabled by the fact that we just unlocked an asset they didn't even know they had. That to me is where this gets really exciting. And that to me is fundamentally different than, oh my gosh, I have no other options. I need a reverse mortgage, right? Because today the industry is looked at as an option of last resort. I'm going from desperate to okay. We want to tell people, no, yes, we can help there too, but we want to take people from good to great. And I think so many Americans, again, there's so much money sitting in their home, and you think about all the good that they can do with it for themselves and for others. That's where this thing just gets really, really exciting. But first, we got to tell the story, right? We got to tell them that this is possible, and we got to give them the tools to do it. And so I think there's a really, really long runway. And that's really why we made the strategic pivot that we did and brought the two companies together and got it focused on retirement, because that's where the need is. And that's where the magic is going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years, in my opinion.
Man, great stuff, buddy. Hey, so for our loan officers that's listening to this today and our mortgage professionals, so they listen to this, we go, hey, here's what we want you to do next. Let's tell them what, if you're listening to this, the first thing we want you to do is
learn more about the HECM product, right? If you are a mortgage professional and you're selling forwards, right, only, learn about the reverse product and learn about it. And there's some great books out there. In fact, I read mine, Understanding Reverse by Dan Hultquist, but there's many. They're simple reads. They're 80, 90 pages. So get educated yourself on the product, right? Dispel rumors, because you'd be surprised. And the same thing is true with financial professionals and financial planners. You'd be surprised how many professionals are victims of the same misinformation or I'd say potentially lack of education on these products. So get educated. And then once you're educated, start a relationship with one of the originators. Clearly, we'd love for them to call us at Finance of America and develop a relationship with us. But, we believe in competition. Call our competitors as well and figure out who's the best partner for you. But really develop relationships. So as you find clients, we can help you originate those products, right? Because again, if you've got older Americans as clients and you may have sold them a forward mortgage, or you sold them a HELOC or whatever, 10, 15, 20 years ago, now might be the time to look at your book of business and say, hey, you know what? There are borrowers who still have 5, 10, 15 years on their forward mortgage. They don't want to be paying that, right? Like they potentially could be using that cash elsewhere. And a reverse mortgage may be a great solution for them. So get educated, start a relationship with one of the originators and see if this can, and look at your book of business, right? And see what opportunities are there. And I think you'd be surprised how many people potentially might raise their hand. And again, you've done the right thing for your customers. You've moved with them in their life stage, and you've potentially grown your business, right? Because you've added a tool to your toolkit that can make you even more of a solution provider for your customers. I think it's a win-win, right? It's a win for us, it's a win for the LO, and it's a win for the customer. So yeah, we'd be happy. We're ready and standing by to expand our relationships with more LOs across the country.
Good for you, Chris. Man, this was really good. Great information. The article was great, but you definitely brought some clarity to a lot of these things.
Awesome.
So, Chris Moschner, is there something I should have asked you today that I didn't, or do you think we covered it okay?
No, I think we covered it. And again, just thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoyed the time. And again, I hope all the loan officers listening, if there was anything, I hope they took at least something they learned new today. And again, looking forward to potentially working with someone going forward. But thank you for the time. This was great.
All right, great. Again, go check out the July edition and the residential edition, the article entitled Brighten Their Future, again in July. And our guest today has been Chris Moschner. And great information. Look more into the reverse mortgages. It's definitely an untapped market for sure. And man, it definitely solves a lot of problems. It certainly warrants a little discovery on our loan officer's part to get more information about it. So thanks for our listeners. Hey, Chris and I would like to ask you a favor, as would the rest of the gang over at Scotsman Guide. Forward this to 3 of your favorite loan officer friends or 3 of your favorite mortgage professionals. They would appreciate it, and I promise you we appreciate it too. So thanks again, and my name is Carl White, and we'll see you on the next edition of Scotsman Guide Author Showcase. Thanks again, everybody. Bye-bye.